Hi, this is Julie Hoisington, and I'm going to talk to you about my service learning at Wickline United Methodist Church. Wickline initially began as the Methodist Church of Midwest City in 1943. This was around the time that Tinker Air Force Base came to Midwest City. The final church that's being used today was erected in 1950. This is a pretty good sized church that has a definite hierarchy to the leadership. The senior pastor is Eric Schneider. Then they have an associate pastor, Nancy Hamilton. Then they also have a lot of different directors that oversee different areas within the church, such as finance, volunteers, education. And then they have a lot of different committees that oversee different areas over that. One of the examples was the trustees committee, which is responsible for the buildings and operations. One thing that I noticed about the leadership within the church is they encourage participation. They want their members to be very active within the church, and they're very inclusive. They don't exclude anybody. If you're willing to help, they want you to help. My first day was spent working with the Wickline Day School, which is a preschool that's operated 3 days a week, and it coincides with the Middale school system. Carol Bates was the director of this area, and she had asked that I help her reorganize a classroom. It's a classroom she's wanting to begin using next school year, but she was concerned about how toys were being stored and wanted some of the closets reorganized for safety purposes. So the first thing that I did was reorganize the closets. I had to go through and check the closets for things like cleaning supplies, any kind of chemical that could be hazardous. There was a lot of old food, which I thought was really odd, that had been stored in the closet. So just going through and just evaluating different things for safety purposes, reorganizing books, checking outdated things. The next thing I had to do was reorganize the shelves. She wanted toys to be placed up on shelves where they could have a holding place, and so I had to reorganize the shelves and then label all the shelves so that each individual toy or toy type could be organized where people would know where to return it. Miss Bates, I kind of got the feeling that she's very bureaucratic. She's very by the rules, had a very organized sense about her, but on this case I think she was more laissez-faire. She gave me the opportunity to make my own decisions regarding the project, and once it was done, she just had nothing but praise. So she pretty much let me do what I wanted to do with it. My next day I spent working in the church office under the direction of Miss Mears, who's the director of involvement. I had actually worked with her 3 hours the week before so that she could show me how to use the software that the church uses for keeping attendance, church membership, demographics. They also use this system for things like tracking tithes and offerings. I wasn't allowed to see that for privacy reasons, but the attendance, the day that I showed up to work in the office, Miss Mears actually wasn't there. And she just left me a note saying, you can do this, I showed you well, you took good notes. And so I felt confident that she had showed me enough that I could get through it. So I collected the attendance sheets that are taken during the services, the 2 worship services, the Sunday school, and during Wednesday night services. I was able to enter the attendance using the software. There was a couple of visitors that I had to add demographic information in. I had to run attendance reports for both the pastor and the associate pastor. And then I had to also enter this information into an Excel spreadsheet. Then I was allowed to get a copy of the operating budget and compare the budget to the attendance and how that correlated against one another. And what was amazing was we'd had a couple of days in January and February where the church was closed, and you could see a direct correlation between the budget and those closures and how it affected the overall budget. There was almost a $10,000 loss of revenue for those 2 months because of the weather. The third day I worked with something called Parents Night Out, And this is an outreach program between the United Methodist Church of Oklahoma and something called the Circle of Care, which is a foster care organization. And so what this program was about was providing a night out for foster parents, kind of giving them a respite in just a couple of hours just to recharge. We had about 100 kids, 100 foster children come through the program that night, and I was in charge of the craft area. And so I had to work with kids making a basket out of paper cups, pipe cleaners, and crop sticks. The entire Parents' Night Out was very organized. Denise Schneider, the pastor's wife, was in charge of the Parents' Night Out, and she was very organized the entire night. I did have some problems in my area. The main problem was I thought that the craft was a little too difficult for some of the kids. The kids' ages started at 3, and so they kind of had a difficult time using glue and organizing the craft sticks. And there just wasn't enough time because there was only 45 minutes per rotation. They had the kids organized by age groups, and so you only had 45 minutes per rotation, and that just didn't give enough time to actually complete the craft, so I had to kind of ad-lib on some of the areas. Some of the strengths of Wickline is that they're very active in the community. They go out and do all kinds of service projects for the community. They have a lot of community involvement. They have things like a summer block party. They also are very diverse. They welcome diversity. Like I said, there's the associate pastor is a woman. In a lot of different churches, you wouldn't see that in. They don't care about sex, race, creed, any of that. They just welcome anybody. Some of the weaknesses they have is the mega churches. Mega churches, things like Life Church, are a lot more contemporary in nature, and Wickline is a very traditional church, and I think they're going to have to bring in some of that contemporary nature in order for the church to continue to thrive, technology being one of those things. Their dependence on volunteers is probably also a weakness. There is only 6 staff members, full-time staff members, and then a couple of part-time staff members in Wickline, and so they're completely dependent on volunteers helping. And then the last thing was their location. Even though they're within the community and it's a great place to be as far as community, where they're at, a lot of people don't know that they're even there. They've erected some signs off of Air Depot to show that the church is back in the community, but they're still very much out of sight, and so I think that that hurts the church. A couple of recommendations that I had. One, I think that they should have some type of volunteer recognition. My suggestion was just doing a thank you note to a couple of volunteers throughout the month and mailing those out, just saying a simple thank you for what they do. The other thing was a volunteer procedure manual. Given the complexity of some of the things that they want the volunteers to do, I think having a procedure manual that outlines step by step what's involved and what's expected, including things like screenshots, making sure that the print's large enough that the volunteers can read, because a lot of these volunteers are retired. And the last thing I recommended was them having a volunteer marketing video where they can go in and ask the volunteers that are currently helping what they do, how complicated it is. I think a lot of people have the expectation that some of these things are just so complex and they're scared to help volunteer. So those were my 3 recommendations: recognition, a procedure manual, and a marketing video. Overall, this was a wonderful place to work. I really enjoyed it, and I would happily do it again. Thank you for watching.